Welcome, Sam. Please put the... I don't even remember, but yeah.
This whole lockdown is basically Death Stranding.
Fucking Kojima, man.
Hey, I'm Fingers.
Yo, this is Vector.
Hey everyone, this is Days Ahead.
And I'm Nitroid. You're listening to the Kojima Frequency.
It is kind of, right?
Yeah.
That game's been seeing a resurgence on YouTube recently. There's been like a string of videos that have been popping up, which I thought was kind of interesting because that game was, it was so dead for the longest time. Nobody was talking about it, but people are talking about it again.
It's obviously luck that has got it to this point where he, it ended up being so prescient, but at the same time, I can't help but like imagine some elite member of high society who saw this thing coming, just happened to be a Kojima fan, was like, hey, I'm going to let you in on what's going to happen over the next year or the next 3 years. And you get the word out, man.
I mean, that would be great and all, but it's not like the game prepares you for, what's going on.
Unless ghosts show up and then all bets are off.
Which could still totally happen. Like
Nitroid, we already talked about this. The BTs, I don't know if you remember this from your stream, but the BTs are the Karens who refuse to wear masks.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. Dude, they should, if they remaster MGS4, they should have a mask, just like a face mask that Snake could wear. They should have like a secret ending where if you wear a face mask, Ocelot doesn't die at the end.
That's pretty good. So, real question though, how long until the first game that has an equipable face mask? Or has it already happened and I'm just not aware?
Ghost of Tsushima, you wear a mask.
But not the same kind.
Oh, I get what,
Yeah.
Death Stranding, you have that
The
oxygen thing. No, I mean like the first game that uses like the medical mask as an equipable item. Not even necessarily for the same purpose, but just like because that's a thing.
There was a really obscure survival horror, like a side-scrolling survival horror game called Lone Survivor.
Oh, you're right. He does wear it in that. I've played that.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, so that comes to mind. No relation to the Mark Wahlberg movie. But yeah, I mean, it's not, but I don't think it serves a purpose. It's just like
there's a thing and he's being careful and it's not really an element of the story. It's just part of the aesthetic.
That's his character design or whatever. It's just part of his costume. So are you asking like, what's the first game that has a mask that actually factors into gameplay?
I don't know. I mean, it just either as gameplay or as just like COVID was a thing, so we put it in.
Well, that's going to take a while, I think.
Yeah.
I put it, there's a face mask on Animal Crossing. That's on my villager's main outfit.
I wonder how much of the changes that have happened will remain around for that long of a period of time.
What about Red Dead Redemption? You could put on a mask to lower your notoriety. Does that count?
I don't know. I think maybe it has to be post-COVID.
Okay. Yeah.
So it might be a while, but I'm just kind of waiting for somebody to do it at this point.
They had the bandanas.
Right.
Do you think Snake would use his bandana as a face mask?
I could see that.
Oh man. Yeah, Snake didn't engage in any sort of social distancing at all. Like CQC.
I mean, he kind of moved to Alaska.
They didn't call him Carrier Boy for nothing.
Yeah. Good point. He was trying. He was like, Colonel, I'm retired.
Maybe MGO2 can like add it in as another update. And
speaking of MGO2.
That's a good segue.
Talk about that.
Yeah, I really want to hear the details, and I figured the best person to explain this to me was Nitroid, so...
Yeah, let's get into it.
Let's put you on the spot.
There, so.
All right, if we're going to talk about it, I'll lay it out, and I'll try to be as level-headed as I can about this, because there's a good chance it's going to come off as a lot more hostile than I intend it to.
You're always so hostile, Nitroid.
And I don't mean it that way. So here's the gist of it. Several years back, a few years back, I don't know how long it's been. a group of fans got together and figured out how to get the original Metal Gear Online and Metal Gear Online 2 games working again. Because, I think it was 2012 when the Metal Gear Online 2 servers went down officially, like the official ones, so you could no longer play. And since then, the game's just been out, right? And it was a long time until something else replaced it. There was, Portable Ops was available to some extent, Peace Walker, and then MGO3 kind of came out to mixed reception, let's say. But these guys did the work and figured out how to get Metal Gear Online 2 functioning again. And they've been making steady progress, and they figured out, first you required, you had to mod your PlayStation and all this other stuff. And then over time, they figured out how to get it working without having to mod it. And it's just been really, really impressive what these guys have done. And then they were doing experiments where they were like, okay, well, can we also inject brand new levels into the game? Like, can we take areas that were either unfinished in the code or were from the single player and like stick them in and mess with it that way? And they're doing all these really cool experiments. And I've been a pretty vocal supporter of them for a while, and it's not perfect. There's always community issues with a game like that, where you've got your regulars and then you've got your casuals, and there's always going to be some friction there. But for the most part, I've really been behind what these guys have been doing. Recently, I should also add that for this entire period of time, the mission statement for this project has. I feel as if it's very clearly been, hey, we're restoring Metal Gear Online 2 because it's no longer available. It was there, it was taken away, we're bringing it back. So it's a restoration effort, right? So, just the other day, they pushed an update to the game, a full-on update to the game. Patch, I think the last official patch was 1.3 something. And they've released their own update to the game, like a legitimate update. They're calling it 1.4, right?
Yeah.
And the patch notes say, this is a fun update to show what's possible. There's much more to come into the future. They changed the title screen. They replace existing songs with other songs. They replace the look of some gear with other gear. So like some of the t-shirts, like I think it's just one t-shirt right now. Like the Tsuchinoko t-shirt is changed with another design for like a contest winner design that they themselves had. And the big one that really set me off was that they went into several of the maps and disabled visual effects to increase the frame rate. Now, Metal Gear Online 2 has it's pretty notoriously badly optimized, not just in netcode, but in just general frame rate. If you get into a big map with 16 players, which is the max for MGO2, it'll run pretty slow. I mean, this game can really chug hard when you get a lot going on screen. But that's just kind of how it was. So this was a game where they sort of very clearly sacrificed performance for aesthetics, because MGO2 is a great looking game and there's a lot going on screen. And what they changed was they removed motion blur, which I don't know how you feel about that, but they yanked that out. They pulled out sand effects, snow effects, debris flying through the air. So all of these little detailed touches that are in a number of maps, they've removed them essentially to speed up the frame rate. And I have a big problem with that because I feel like that's changing core elements of the game to make it something that you think is, to make, essentially it's fans trying to improve something that's not theirs. It's no longer a restoration effort. It's like PlayerUnknown's Metal Gear Online at this point, right? As a friend of mine put it. And so when you get to that point of, we're not trying to restore the game or maintain something that was here and then taken away, we're trying to make our own thing that we think is better, that's not good, I think. I mean, it's their project and they can do what they want. That's fine. But I'm not going to support it anymore because as of right now, there is no way to play Metal Gear Online 2 in anything in a mostly authentic sense, I should say. I mean, the very idea of the very idea of playing it on a custom server isn't authentic to begin with, but every update from this onward is going to take it further and further away from authenticity, I feel. And so I can't support that. So
this is the only team that's working on okay. So I wanted to make sure there weren't like multiple.
No, there is no other way to play it online. They have people from Japan come into these servers to play. And this is it.
Yeah, how difficult would it be to have another team that's that's you know what I mean?
Or just restore it to a previous have the previous 1.3 version like accessible or something, like running on something else, and then because that was the version at which they still had it, pretty much the same, right?
I can't say how difficult or not difficult that would be because I don't understand the intricacies of how they even did this to begin with.
Right.
There is source code for the server stored online. Not official source code, but like the source code these guys have written to emulate the MGO servers and get it running. It's way above my head. Maybe somebody else can look at that and make it work. I certainly can't. So I don't know. It seems like it would be something that would require quite a bit of specialty knowledge to make it operate, but I don't know. I just that's the bottom line is I don't know. So
I mean,
if someone out there,
additionally, just outside of a technical logistics standpoint, with any multiplayer game, there's also a concern, especially with smaller player bases, that if you make both versions available, you're essentially splitting an already tiny player base.
Yeah, and that's a fair assessment. Somebody brought up the point that this could have negative effects on actual stealth tactics in the game because things like team sneak, where people rely on environmental effects for camouflage, even if it's in a small degree, that could have a negative effect on gameplay. Even an increased frame rate can have an effect on gameplay. Like the smallest changes can have large effects on the way people play.
Right.
But the retort to that was essentially, well, the people who play that regularly don't really care about that anyway, and they're behind these changes. And I feel like, that's sort of making my point for me there, because you're catering to a very small community of people at this point who want something different. They don't want that game anymore. And so you've already splintered it. I feel like you've splintered it between the people who want to expand it into something new and the people who played it because it was something authentic that they remembered and no longer had access to. And even though we're talking about such a small group of people here, it just, in principle, it just seems wrong to me. But it's theirs. They can do what they want.
I feel like a lot of that, you could just make like a custom games. You know how you go into custom games and just like set up options per match.
Yeah.
But
you got to remember too, we're not talking about a game that they've coded. We're talking about essentially a lot of hacks running.
Yeah.
So and these things are all running for the most part server side. So like major changes to the game's source code, even though they're able to patch certain things, it's within, to my understanding, pretty severe limitations. So it's not like they can go in and like add an option to, like if you wanted to add like a volume slider to the music, that's not something they can just patch in because they don't have access to the source code of the game and they can't just publish it in.
Yeah.
They're working within very, very tight restraints. So something like that would not be possible, I'm assuming.
I was just thinking with the additional stuff that they were putting in, they would know how to at least have that turn on and or off.
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, and I might not be, but if I'm remembering right, when they were adding in new missions and things like that, they were only able to do it because they replaced other ones as a test. They weren't publishing these to the server publicly. They were like private behind the scenes things to see what they could do.
Gotcha.
It was like, okay, well, if we take Urban Ultimatum and put Outer Haven's map there instead, then when we load up Urban Ultimatum, it'll say Urban Ultimatum, but really we're playing in Outer Haven or something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, it's this stuff is so technical and above my head that I can't really say to any detail what they can and can't do. I just know that I don't feel like in principle it's a good idea to change the core game when there's no other way out there to play the original. But I don't know. I'm torn between they did the work, it's their right to do what they want, and you've brought back something that was lost, so you have a responsibility now to maintain it properly. So I'm somewhere in between those two poles.
Yeah.
But that's the gist of it.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. Like if you're talking about preservation, but
that's
my
the
whole
key
thing
word,
is,
by the way.
Yeah, preservation, right? And the fact that there's no other way to play it, and this is like the only way that centuries from now there will be footage of this version if you're talking about archiving the versions, I don't know. I feel like for me, it's like you can either take it with the changes or you get nothing at all. And I feel like this is better than not being able to play it in any form or any capacity. So, maybe. And also, yeah, it sounds like they're trying to make improvements based on feedback. It doesn't sound like it's arbitrary changes like, oh, we want to change this just for the hell of it. It's like they're trying to change it because the people that are still playing it, they don't like how it exists in its current form. And I'm all for that.
And I completely understand that point of view. I don't expect I'm not trying to convince anybody to go my route. I think it's a mistake, and if anybody else agrees with me, great. I'm not gonna participate in this anymore because I don't like that direction. But and I understand that's kind of an extreme position, but that's how I feel, and so I'm gonna kind of follow my principles there.
That makes perfect sense.
But I'm not gonna begrudge anybody who's like, well, I don't really care about trash flying through the air. I'm gonna keep playing. Like I don't begrudge that, and they're not necessarily wrong. This is just how I feel about it.
That makes perfect sense to me because I felt literally the exact same about the entire Metal Gear franchise. So I completely get it.
I saw a picture earlier that a friend of mine sent that just made me feel kind of viscerally ill. That's kind of related to the topic of preservation. It was some Ratchet and Clank fan had these discs for the game super glued onto plexiglass as part of a sort of a collage of Ratchet and Clank merchandise.
Wow.
But that's only half of it, because the discs that they've super glued onto plexiglass to make this display were beta discs.
Whoa. Whoa.
And when I see that kind of thing, it just kind of makes me want to throw up in my mouth a little bit.
That's that's bad.
So the Metal Gear Online thing sort of registers in that same way, not quite as, not as extreme as that, but it's hitting the same nerves where I just feel like, you're not preserving this properly. I've got this mindset of a museum curator with this stuff, where if it's not properly displayed and presented, it's like an itch I need to scratch.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
So I don't know. I mean, we're kind of running into a place now where a lot of the older games are getting harder and harder to get a hold of. I mean, we're going to be 2 generations detached from the last official release of most of the Metal Gear games, here soon.
Right.
A PC release would fix this in overnight essentially, but as is, there's really no official way to play it on the PS4 other than streaming it off of a PS3 in a server farm somewhere.
Yeah.
Wasn't that sort of what you did with
Substance? Yeah, I was streaming it from PlayStation Now into my computer and then streaming it back out to Twitch, which I'm pretty sure the only reason that worked as well as it did was because I've got gigabit internet, and that's not, a normal circumstance that everyone, your average player is not going to have that kind of bandwidth to do this. But to their credit, it didn't work as bad as I thought. There's a little bit of delay, but it's far less than you might think. But it's no substitute for a proper port.
Right. Yeah, well, what is there any indication that Konami's ever going to make another video game again, ever? You know what I mean?
I mean, they've got a mobile Castlevania game coming out, I guess.
I guess I meant, for the core demographic, an actual console release, because that was their whole business model was we're going to focus on mobile development because it's way easier and we can get people to buy our microtransactions and it's a higher profit margin. But there's no indication that Konami's ever going to make another game again. There are rumors. We got tons of rumors.
And those rumors, I've been there's so many rumors flying around and so many of them sort of flow in from 4chan that I really struggle to take any of them seriously.
Right.
But I guess now you've got it's picking up steam, Yeah. So I'm trying to remember exactly, but there's a guy who is fairly well known for leaking Resident Evil news on Twitter, and he goes by Dusk Golem. And to my knowledge, pretty much everything he's ever said has come to pass in some respect, and he's the guy who leaked all the early news about RE3 remake before it happened, and then it was being done by like the B team, and it wasn't going to be what you'd expect, and there were more details that he's done. And he's the guy, I think, who leaked all the stuff about the RE4 remake plans and Resident Evil 8 and all these things. And like, there's been more in the past that he leaked with that RE2 remake, if I'm remembering right, but like he's been on point. And now even he is parroting the rumors about Silent Hill, saying, okay, yeah, this has actually got some weight to it. So I guess the rumor is right now that Sony Japan is working on a Silent Hill reboot of sorts for PS5, and they've got Masahiro Ito, the original artist, doing the art. They've got Akira Yamaoka doing the music, who's the original composer. They've got Keiichiro Toyama, who was the original, creator of Silent Hill and Siren, coming back. So like they've got the original trio back working on this. So if that's true, I mean, that's a pretty big step. I don't know if it'll be enough to kind of counterbalance all of the negative karma that Konami has kind of chalked up over the past few years, but if it's good enough, it might, I don't know.
I don't know. Like, gamers, they seem to be pretty forgiving if you put out a product. I mean, everybody I know who was protesting Blizzard over the whole Hearthstone thing is already back on Overwatch.
Yeah. And I guess every time, for every screw Konami tweet I see, I'll see another, like, please remake MGS1 tweet, so like...
Right.
It's a spurned love.
I'm so mad at you, but give me what I want.
Yeah.
So who knows? I mean, if they do that, it'll probably go over well. It won't be PT, but
I'm fine with that personally. I didn't want. We've discussed this a little bit, but what was PT? It was a playable teaser. It had some great atmosphere. There was no game there. There was no indication that it was ever going to be a game, and the fact that people. The idea that people are going to be mad at this Silent Hill reboot, that it's not PT with Guillermo del Toro and Hideo Kojima, let them cry about it.
I never felt like PT was representative of what the game was going to be. I mean, they even said that. I just felt like that was them sort of throwing the gauntlet down and saying, this is what we put together in a short amount of time working together.
Right.
Just to show you what we're capable of. And we're going to do Silent Hill now, so get ready.
Yeah.
That's how it came off to me.
I thought it looked great, but you're looping down a hallway a million times. There was no proof of concept that they would be able to deliver on a Silent Hill game. So, I think if they really are making a Silent Hill reboot, fingers crossed, I hope they are, but I think man, they'd really have to bring their A game. And here's the thing about horror games. There's a reason why we saw less of them over time, because the games started costing more money to make, so they needed to make more money, and horror games have never done that. You always make a horror game to be more niche. And that's why Resident Evil got so bloated, and we got games like Resident Evil 6, because the game needed to be all things to all people so that it could make its money back. And in Resident Evil 7, when they finally rebooted it and they got back to the survival horror roots, that game didn't sell that well.
Didn't it? I thought 7 sold extremely well.
I don't think it did. Last I saw, it wasn't a commercial success, which is why instead of going into 8, because, the game ends kind of like, okay, they're going into Resident Evil 8, they're going to continue this. But no, they didn't do that. They did 2 and 3 instead, because that was...
Okay, according to Capcom's latest update as of February of this year, RE7 has sold over 7 million copies, and it's the third best-selling game in the series. But that puts it right behind RE6 and RE5, so...
I mean, that's great. I mean, if it did sell that well... Where's my sequel? That was my favorite game of 2017. Well, I really could have done. I really wish I knew about this Dusk Golem guy when he was leaking info about RE3. I could have avoided that stain on my life.
Could have saved me $60 here, But it sounds like 8 is going to be a follow-up to 7. You're going to be the same character. You're just going to go and investigate where everything from 7 came from, which seems kind of weird to me that you would play as the same character, considering this guy's kind of a nobody.
Right.
But I guess that's kind of how it's always gone in Resident Evil, to an extent. You kind of start out as nobody, and then you get sucked into the drama of the world.
Right, yeah.
But
Watch him
RE3...
just be like, I'm Jill's cousin.
Right. 3 was just
totally
3 felt like they were steering back towards RE4's action-oriented style, but maybe that's just because it was the so-called B team working on it.
I mean, I'm really glad to hear that RE7 did sell well, but I don't understand why. And what's interesting is the fact that a lot of people were comparing that game to PT because it's in first person,
right?
And it looked really similar.
But they had been doing that for a while. That had been in development long before PT.
Exactly. So it seemed like they had struck gold, and the fact that they didn't continue from where they left off and they decided instead to remake 2. That was weird. And here's why I guess the reason why I felt like RE7 didn't sell that well was because you usually see it on sale for dirt cheap. And that's always an indication that, people aren't picking it up.
Then again, I mean, they just started giving away Grand Theft Auto 5 for free.
That's different though. China's giving that game away to rope people in. They're trying
They're making, I know. They're making their money from GTA Online.
Right. And it's weird because if you just go on GTA Online and yell free Tibet in the chat, then that it has to be pulled from all the Chinese servers. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird. It's hard to, they guard these numbers and keep them so close to the chest that it's really hard to draw any clear conclusions. But I mean, in general, do you feel like horror as a genre is not profitable?
I didn't mean not profitable, but what I meant was, in the PS2 era, it was pretty simple to make a horror game. You had Silent Hill 2, Siren, all those Resident Evil games, but when the 360 and the PS3 came around, just cost of development skyrocketed, and you couldn't make a pure horror game like you used to be able to because if it was low quality, then people wouldn't buy it. So you had to put a AAA development budget behind it. But once you did that, then that increased the types of numbers that you'd have to see when the game finally came out. So like for the longest time, horror games, they went away. It was, it wasn't that long. There was like a span of maybe 3 or 4 years where no one was making survival horror games anymore. But then they kind of they had a resurgence sometime around, I want to say like Until Dawn came out and it did really well. And it was like, okay, maybe we can make horror games again. And then,
the Outlast series has done pretty well financially, hasn't it?
Oh, you know what? I think maybe Amnesia was really
thinking, like the indie horror games.
There was The Evil Within,
where everyone started getting experimental with it.
Right. Yeah. Amnesia started that whole thing, and that I feel like also skyrocketed or it boosted like Twitch streamers and reaction videos, and that was a whole deal. That was back in 2012.
Yeah,
I want to say. Yeah.
So that kind of makes me wonder, like
Slenderman as well. Like
Slenderman.
that was
definitely
a whole thing that got everybody into horror stuff again.
So what killed it is the question, because around 2008 you had Dead Space, and that was a success. And then Dead Space.
Look what happened to Dead Space 3.
Let's not talk about maybe Dead Space 3 was what killed it, because Dead Space was popular because you were this isolated everyman,
right,
in a dark place that was very claustrophobic, put up against this existential threat that was incredibly enigmatic, and you had no answer for what it was, and it was really compelling, really atmospheric stuff. And I mean, it was jump scare heavy, but it was like the filet mignon of jump scares at the time.
Right. Yeah.
And so
no, that game's incredible.
And so Dead Space 2 mostly kind of stuck with it, but started answering a few too many questions for my comfort zone, And then 3 looks at that formula of the first game and goes, let's do the exact opposite. We're going to give you a partner. We're going to make you important. We're going to put you in broad daylight, and we're going to explain every little thing we can.
Right.
And it was terrible.
I'm definitely gonna have to do a ton of research on this. I've been planning to for the longest time. Years and years ago, when I was first starting out on YouTube, I did a video about the history and design of survival horror games, but I wanted to go a lot more in depth about it, and this is why, because there was a time when you just weren't seeing a lot of survival horror games. Dead Space was a rare example. That was like a time where EA they were really on top of their game, pun intended, and they were just pumping out so many risky, they were just taking a shit ton of risks.
Yeah, but the devil was in the details there, because the reason they were taking so many risks is that they were gobbling up all these small studios, and the small studios were the ones taking the risks.
I don't know about that. Because EA also published Shadows of the Damned, which was produced by Shinji Mikami, creator of Resident Evil, and it was directed by Suda51. And Suda51, his whole deal is, I want the graphics to be cel shaded. EA came in and were like, no, make the graphics realistic, and he was against it, but
there was a lot of corporate meddling with that game.
Yeah, there really was, and so. With Dead Space, and if we're talking 2008, you had Dead Space, Mirror's Edge, and there were a couple other games that came out that year from EA that was just so unlike what they would usually do. I think that worked out really well. But the fact that Dead Space turned out to be a success, that seems like a happy accident.
They just kind of hit the right note there. I loved it because it was essentially Event Horizon, the video game, and that's one of my favorite movies.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
I know we've talked about it a little bit, but what did you think of Alien Isolation?
Oh, right. Yeah, so Alien Isolation was another game that came out of that like Amnesia influence, where, it was, for the most part, you're running away from this creature, and you can fight back, but you can't really kill it. It's, it hunts you for the duration of the game. And I feel like, people have said this before, a lot of that came from Nemesis in Resident Evil 3. The fact that he follows you from room to room and you never really get rid of him. And so I feel like I think there's an interview out there where the Amnesia guys were like, yeah, we were influenced by Nemesis from RE3. I could be wrong though, but
it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, all these things draw threads to one another, and
exactly. Yeah. It makes total sense.
Isolation is probably, my favorite horror game that I've ever played, just because of how effective a stalker the xenomorph is.
Right. Yeah. No, that's super awesome. I'm a big fan of that game, and it's the weirdest thing. I have not played it. It's on my my list of games to play one day, but I'm still I'm a huge fan of the fact that it exists. You know what I mean? If that makes any sense.
It's not perfect because it goes on a bit longer than it maybe should. I mean, it's a very long game. Once you kind of figure out how the alien works, it does detract from it a little bit, not much, because there's an element of not randomness, but unpredictability to it that you never quite get over. And it adheres to its aesthetic to a fault. Because it follows the first movie's art direction almost perfectly.
Right.
It to a scary degree how accurate it is, but then that also means you're reading a lot of logs on computers, and that can that can drag on a bit. But one of the coolest aspects of the game, and I'm sure I haven't really watched any Let's Plays or anything of this game, so I don't really know what the reaction, the wide reaction was to this. But one aspect of the game is that saving is risky. You have to use this terminal, and it takes a few seconds to insert your card, and it has to open up and turn on and actually do your save. And you can get killed by the alien while you're saving.
Yeah, most games don't do that.
Which is just you've taken one of the few things that gamers kind of intuitively accept as safe,
Right.
and you've stripped that away. It would be like Mr. X following you into the save room.
Which happens in 3, right?
It
happens in like one place.
And a specific difficulty mode, I think, too.
Yeah.
To an additional, or to a lesser extent, rather, Dead Space is kind of oppressive in that sense, because you have to access, I mean, a lot of horror games do this, but I felt like Dead Space did it especially well, where you have to access that item menu, and
right.
you have to access it, and it's sort of like this projection in front of you, so you kind of see everything that's happening in front of you while you're trying to adjust and configure what you need.
Right, yeah, there's no pausing.
Yeah, they got a lot of they got a lot of credit for the sort of diegetic interface that they had in Dead Space, where it's like part of it's not this detached thing from the narrative. It's actually like in the game, and he's looking at it and browsing it, and so.
No, yeah, I could talk about that game for literally hours upon hours. It's really a masterpiece.
Yeah. 2,
not as much, even though I still enjoy that game. And then 3 happened, and it was like, why?
2, 2 had a couple of moments that I really, really liked.
Yeah.
One is kind of hokey. I liked the whole Iron Man moment just because it's ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah. But in serious talk, I really liked the return to the Ishimura.
Okay.
Because they take you back to that ship from the first game, and for about a half hour, you don't see a single enemy, and you are taken out of like the darkness of the station. And you're put into these like bright crushing lights of the ship that you previously walked through in the last game. And there's like white tarps everywhere and cleaning supplies, and you can see where they've scrubbed stuff down. And there's even a point where like there's a black light that comes on and you can see the remnants of bloodstains, and it's really unsettling. And you're going through these, this essentially this crypt of the first game that has now become sterile, and nothing happens for like a half hour. No attacks,
right.
No enemies, nothing. No indication that anything is going to happen, and it drives you crazy because the anticipation just builds and builds. Like, they're going to do something. They're going to do something. When's it going to happen? And it was like right at the moment, like it was perfectly timed for me. And I know, it might not be the same for everybody, but like you get to a part in there where it just feels like the tension is at its highest moment, and I am about ready to scream at the game like, come on now, where is it? And right at that moment, something jumps out from behind some boxes and nearly kills me. And it was just like, it was the perfect scare. It was like the tension was like at the absolute limit to what you could push it to. And then it released.
Yeah. No,
that game was good at like scaring you even when you knew you were about to get scared. You're like, come on. Oh, damn it. Oh, it still got me.
Yeah, it played with your anticipation of the jump scares.
Yep.
I do love it when horror is genre savvy.
Yeah.
When, especially to Vector's point, I was thinking about Until Dawn, how some of the mechanics are oppressive in a sense that it goes against your logic. Things that you think would save somebody would actually fuck them over or fuck another player over.
Right.
And they actually inverted QuickTime mechanics where it was like, no, don't try to press something quickly, try not to move, and sometimes inaction is the best action. So I also appreciate those sort of like genre savvy types of oppressive mechanics in horror.
Yeah, Until Dawn and Dead Space are both just amazing, and I'm glad that team got a chance to make another game. Fingers, I know you played Man of Medan.
Yeah, that one wasn't as good. It felt like just like half baked a little, but it was okay. I definitely knew what was going on like immediately. You know what I mean? Like as far as the spoiler plot point goes.
Okay. Yeah, I hope those guys continue to make games, and hopefully they get something that's on par with the original Until Dawn. Huge fan of that game. But speaking of horror games, we kind of got a hint that maybe our favorite crypto weirdo game developer guy might be working on on something horror based maybe.
Yeah, the tweet he made a while back was a little hard to decipher in English.
That was back in November, right?
Yeah, and I asked some people. I asked actually 3 different people who are fluent in Japanese to independently translate the original Japanese tweet, because the English version was kind of hard to decipher. It wasn't clear if he was talking about making a new horror game, like if he was thinking about a new horror game, or if he was reminiscing about his experience making PT.
Right.
And it just seems like a lot of gaming news outlets just take what they want to hear out of a statement and roll with it.
Definitely.
So
do you
I
have
asked,
the tweet?
How
hard would that be to find?
Not hard. Give me 1 second. I'll find it.
Oh, look for just look for Kojima the Eye, because that was the name of the movie he was referencing.
Right. So it was
There it is.
Have you guys noticed that Kojima's been like suspiciously away
quiet
from Twitter?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's probably not much to talk about. He can't go outside and take photos as much. He's not having as many fancy lunches.
Can't eat cheeseburgers in public.
It's like, I can only retweet this same picture of the Death Stranding cast so many times. It's like, Jesus.
I'm waiting for his "I'm all right" tweet. If anybody remembers that.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I remember them saying there was like an outbreak at, Koji Productions, and then it was just kind of okay.
So I don't have the English tweet. I do. He said, and this is the tweet as said from his English account.
Yeah.
As to make the scariest horror game, I'll watch the scary movies in order to awaken my horror soul. The Eye is the Thai horror movie I rent when making PT, but was too scary to finish watching. The package is scary, so I rented the disc only. Will I be able to finish watching? And that's very kind of rough English. So I was wondering what that was in Japanese, because that statement, as to make the scariest horror game, I'll watch the scary movies in order to awaken my horror soul or whatever. It sounds like you could take it either way, given the next sentence is about PT. He's either saying he's thinking about, making another horror game and that's in his head, or he was talking about his time making PT. It could go either way. So I had 3 different people independently translate it, and they've all basically said the same thing, that he is talking about thinking of a new game.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, the original Japanese tweet was way different, drastically different than this translation.
I just remembered you're one of the 3 people, so
You just now remember that? I thought that's why we were talking about this in the first place.
It's been a long day, man. It's been a long day.
Yeah, so I offered my
I asked you
interpretation.
and 2 other people because I didn't trust you.
Okay, no, yeah, never trust me, because I was the first to tell you, my shit is rusty. But
no, you were spot on.
Well, I'm looking for the original tweet, because there's a lot more detail in the original Japanese, but I can't find it. I don't know why.
Hold on, I'll send it to you.
But it's worth unpacking, because there's a lot of information in there. Oh, good, you found it.
Yep.
Okay, I scrolled up for 2 years, so I got to make my way back down. Oh, here we go. Okay, all right. So, and I also threw it into Google Translate, so just to make sure I wasn't missing anything. So yeah, he is talking about making a new game, but the way that he's saying it, it's kind of like as a thought experiment. You know what I mean?
Right.
So he's like, if I were going to make a horror game, here's how I would do it. And that's I guess this could be more of an indication that he's not working on anything at all. And that's this is just him thinking about if I could work right now and we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, here's what I would do. So.
Well, he said not too long ago that the project he was most thinking about, I'm trying to remember what it is. I'll have to dig it up, but I could have sworn he talked about what he wanted to do after Death Stranding, and it had to do with messing with the dynamic of streamers and their audience.
Oh, right. I remember that.
And so he wanted to create some sort of an interaction there where the people watching can change the game that the player is streaming, and there's a back and forth there. And PlayStation, with their built-in streaming service, kind of has a very small version of that to some extent. Very few games have made any use of it, but I'm trying to think of an example, but like you can throw obstacles into games.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those like party games.
Yeah.
And the Telltale games.
Doki Doki Literature Club, it has a change. If you have like the dialogue with the sort of final area changes, if you have like a streaming client running, and essentially the character, the final boss, quote unquote, does a jump scare for the audience.
That's creepy.
So
this was more
she's just like, oh, I see you have people watching us. I have a little surprise for them. And then she like flashes this creepy face. Spoilers.
Oh, that's creepy.
Yeah.
The thing Kojima was talking about more like it almost sounded like let's say you're running through a level and a player watching can throw an obstacle in your way.
Okay.
All right, cool.
So I don't know.
That sounds great.
I kind of doubt we'll see a horror game next unless maybe that's, whatever's coming next, they're probably already working on it.
Well, when I first saw the tweet, I looked at it. The Japanese version reads more like an advertisement, and that's probably why there was no translation for this in the English version, because he specifically references the place where he rented the movie, which is like, I don't know what purpose that serves. Why would you even
You get a little scratch on the side?
That's kind of what it seemed like. But I mean, it's maybe he's just like, hey, I really like this place and support him so that I can keep going there. That's also possible. But yeah, the main thing here is, to me, it's more like him saying, this is it's just an idea that he's throwing around. I don't think that it's really an indication that he really is making a horror game. But he's been talking about, he's been talking about making horror games for so long. Eventually, he wound up and just did it. Death Stranding essentially was as close to survival horror as Kojima gets.
Okay, as close as he gets, yeah, maybe.
Right. Yeah, from a gameplay perspective, it's more of a stealth game, but
there wasn't really anything scary in that game other than a couple of like hokey, jump scare moments where the screen goes red.
Some of the BT moments when you're like sneaking around that got a little sketchy, like before you knew what you were doing and you didn't have the handcuff things.
Yeah, but it felt not too far detached from just avoiding guards in Metal Gear.
Right. Well,
I was playing it with headphones and that shit was scary. I don't know if it was just like the sound design going on, but just they made it really tense.
The DNA of Metal Gear is very much in that game.
Yeah, for sure.
So here's something that's going to blow your mind real quick. If you from a gameplay perspective, if you just look at it in terms of gameplay, and if you remove the horror elements, a survival horror game. Here's the weird thing: is that we call it survival horror, right? But the horror element it's not essential for the gameplay to work. So if you remove the horror aspect, then games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill, the fact that, you're trying to avoid enemies and, and you're conserving resources, that makes the game nearly indistinguishable from a stealth game. And they even tried to do this. Rockstar tried to make a survival horror game with real people, and which is how we wound up with Manhunt. And that game is literally a Splinter Cell clone. So yeah, the more you know.
That might explain why I like the two.
To be fair, Sam Fisher does not kill people with plastic bags.
He should.
He should, though.
Yeah, and broken shards of glass with cloth wrapped around him. And he should shove crowbars up people's asses. That seems like something Sam Fisher would do.
But to the point of Manhunt, there was that mechanic where if you had a mic, people could hear you. That was very Kojima-esque. So if you had
definitely.
If you had I think it was probably like peripheral because it was that generation. But if you had that, for people who don't know, the NPCs, people hunting you down in the game, they would hear you. And you could use it, exploit it for your own gain. But again, something that sort of breaks like the technical logistics of a video game, of a console, of its features.
Alien Isolation actually has a similar mechanic where you can optionally turn on your mic and your camera. And your camera can be used so that you can lean in either direction to peek around things. Like you lean in real life, the camera detects it, and your character leans in game and you look around objects. But with the microphone, it's this kind of the same thing where if you get startled and you make a loud noise because you were scared, the alien will hear it.
I worked on a game in college, the student project, where you play as a character who's they're blind, but they can see the environment through echolocation. So it was a horror game, and you had to play with a microphone, and you would speak into the microphone, and that would shoot out like a sonar, and that was the light would bounce or the sound would bounce around the walls, and that's how you could actually see the map. But that sound was also what let enemies hear you. And so, because the enemies were blind too. And so that was the only way that enemies would ever track you, was the sound that you needed to see where the hell you were going. It was a great idea, but the team wound up being a bunch of jerks, and it didn't end well between the two of us. But I thought that was a cool idea.
A lot of people have taken that since and run with it. There are several echolocation survival horror games now.
Man, yeah, where are those at? I'd love to see
indie projects. Like one's
right.
called Lurking, for example.
All right, I got to check that out. That's pretty cool.
I haven't played any of them. I'm just kind of aware of them.
Right.
But that's a concept that kind of picked up. And I think there's another echolocation game where it's not survival horror. You're just somebody sort of navigating an environment through sound.
Okay. Right on.
And it's just kind of exploring what it's like not to have vision.
Right. Wow. Yeah. I think they wound up using my suggestion, which was if you remember the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie, the way that he sees it's kind of the aesthetic they chose for the final look of the game, which was interesting. I just
saw a screenshot of that. I was looking some stuff up, and I think I just saw something like that.
Not a terrible movie. Anyway, point is, Kojima loves putting zombies in his games. He's been dying to do a horror game for a while.
What are you talking about? Zombies have nothing to do with Metal Gear. Crazy talk.
Right.
Cue that tweet from 2013.
Yeah.
Want to make us a genuine zombie game.
Right. Yeah, I remember...
Can't dodge that one.
No, I remember he had a really crazy idea. We talked about this a few episodes back, I feel like, where he wanted to make a game where it's like an MMO or something. And if you turn into a zombie, you can't make another character until like somebody kills you.
Yeah. Something like that. It was, you would still have to pay for your account. Your character would be walking around, and you would either have to open up a second account or get your friend to kill you to get your first account back.
All right. Obviously that wouldn't have worked out.
But he's also talked about how, like, Metal Gear Rising 2, he wanted to have nanomachine zombies, which is basically the concept from Survive.
Yep, yeah. Guy loves zombies. I wonder if that has anything to do with, I used to have crazy dreams about zombies, and that, apparently, I did, like, some dream analysis thing, and that means you're like, if you dream about zombies, you're stuck in, like, an endless loop, or, you feel like you're just going through the motions, and you're not innovating, or you're essentially brain dead. And so I wonder if he felt like that, and that's what inspired him to think about a zombie game.
What does it say if you dream about Guy Savage in your sleep, and Dracula and vampires?
Yeah, vampires are different, right? So I don't know. I haven't had any vampire dreams, but maybe Kojima has. He's got several vampires in his games. you know?
I was, not to be like, I don't know. I was thinking about, when you said that, I was thinking about the Guy Savage Easter egg and like the original 3. Like you can't even see it in Subsistence or the HD collections.
Right.
I'm like, okay.
Which sucks, because that's a really good friggin' little... You want to talk about a playable teaser? Guy Savage blows PT out of the water.
You want to talk about Guy Savage, though. You guys might already know this, but that was a prototype for Zone of the Enders 3.
Yeah. That sucks. Like, either of those I would have taken over Survive.
Man, did you ever take a look at the early concept work that they put out for a potential Zone of the Enders 3, the Project Enders artwork?
I saw the artwork, yeah. How it was like JFT, and they were all like jacked up.
Yeah, they were. It was like
some kind
gothic
of like chain whip
kind of stuff. Yeah, and it looked so cool, man.
Yeah.
And essentially the reason why it didn't get made was because the Zone of the Enders HD collection did so poorly.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's I got
the best
tears in my
series
eyes.
that has never done well.
Oh wait, I just found something. To see a vampire in your dream symbolizes an aspect of your personality that is parasitic or selfishly feeds off others.
Parasites, you say?
Ooh, yeah, parasites. There you go. It's right there. So,
well, why was Big Boss afraid of vampires? Such a weird phobia.
I think that was just a half-assed bit of characterization. Like, all right, we got to try and make him human. So, what's he afraid of? Oh, vampires. What's he like to do? Eat everything.
I can give you kind of like what my gut feeling is about it.
Okay.
Metal Gear has its chronology, but it kind of exists in release order to an extent. Metal Gear Solid 3 more directly references things in Metal Gear Solid 2 than it does like Metal Gear 1 or 2, for example.
Right. Yeah, good point.
So I think it was just them saying, Snake doesn't like his experiences with Vamp.
Okay. Maybe.
That's kind of how it came off to me.
But also, here's
sort of
this
a
cool
weird
game.
Yeah. Here's this awesome game. So wait, did they take out the vampire conversation entirely in the HD remaster?
I think so.
Yeah, there's no way to access that conversation, right?
I was just talking to someone earlier about all the things that got removed from the HD collection. So like in 3, they got rid of Guy Savage. They got rid of Snake versus Monkey.
Yeah.
And you can kind of understand both of those to an extent. Because Guy Savage was its own engine. Snake versus Monkey, required certain licenses. You've got, Metal Gear Online was removed for obvious reasons. The servers haven't been online in ages. And then MGS2, they got rid of the skateboarding mission, which was, again, the different engine. It was essentially a demo for Konami's Evolution skateboarding game.
Right.
But it just still kind of sucks,
Yeah, those are fun little things that made the games better, but,
Totally.
Hunt down the OG versions, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, emulation, is kind of caught up now. So if you want to play them at a higher resolution, you can.
Going back to preserving the past.
Yeah. I guess that's the one thing we can always count on is emulation to kind of keep the torch lit at least a little bit. So despite the fact that PT is eventually going to fade away in terms of ways to play it on the proper hardware,
right?
Once somebody out there cracks PS4 emulation, it'll never be gone. And then there's the all of the different fan remakes of it, like the Unreal Engine remake of it,
right?
Which I never played it, but I heard it was extremely authentic.
I mean, I'm sure it is. Still not a game, though. Still not a game.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not, but I mean, it was this free little experiment that was released, Does it have to be like a traditionally playable thing, or can it exist as just sort of a weird artistic experiment? Like, can we have that in games?
Now, that's a great question, and I need time to think about an answer. Anybody else want to weigh in?
The way I see it, I'm trying to look at this as sort of like a glass half full situation. The way I see it is that was Kojima's form of marketing. I mean, it's literally called playable teaser. And if they're going to put effort into that, I would prefer that than for them to spend like millions putting video games, AAA games on my cans of like Mountain Dews and like boxes of Cheez-Its.
Yeah, but he's done that too.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Gotta throw a wide net.
Yeah, the thing about that playable teaser is that they did spend millions. They had to give Norman Reedus a paycheck. That was a huge chunk of the budget. And then they had to pay salaries for all the people that put that together. I'm sure Guillermo del Toro wasn't working for free either.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's my point, is that I would rather them put that money and effort towards doing those sort of unique experiences than just slapping something on a product.
We don't know that, though. For all we know, they could have worked to scale on something like that. It's hard to say.
That's true. But I also feel like that's one of the reasons why Konami closed their games division, was because money was being wasted on stuff like that.
Possibly, yeah. It was one of the most audacious things that Kojima said about PT was that they tried to make it look like a cheap indie game, and I'm thinking, do you know what cheap indie games look like?
I think that was BS. That was a flat out lie.
Yeah.
So
An indie game with a $10 million budget, maybe.
Right. Which was what those guys at Ninja Theory did with Senua's Sacrifice.
Right. That is one of the most impressive case studies to look at in terms of low-cost game development. I mean, obviously they had a studio on hand and all of these resources and all of these talented developers to make something like this, but on a shoestring budget they were able to crank out something like that.
I think the budget for that, I feel like the budget for that was only like $5 million, I want to say.
I think it was 10, but
maybe
still
10,
for a AAA quality title. Like people were throwing around the term like triple I, like AAA indie title.
Right.
After that came out. But like they wanted to say like, after you've established your studio, you don't have to keep throwing these giant bags of money at your project to get it made. You can scale it backwards. And it was, I mean, that's impressive what they were able to pull off.
Yeah, I wish Kojima would do the same. I was actually disappointed when I found Sony was back in his next project, and I feel like he could really shine if he had more limitations that forced him to be more creative. Death Stranding, he kind of like was able to do whatever the hell he wanted, and some people really liked it. I thought it was a massive waste of potential, in my opinion.
I will agree that I think Kojima with limitations is a more capable creator than Kojima with a blank check.
Right.
One thing I always kind of suspected he was trying to do at Konami, but I'll never know for sure. I wish I could get an answer on this, but it seemed to me like the entire, course correction from just making games to making an engine and marketing that engine and putting themselves in the center of Los Angeles near all of these producers was him kind of low-key making the statement, we're going to be a technology company as well as a game developer, because he wanted to establish some sort of passive income so that he could continue to fund these kind of projects without, the higher-ups breathing down his neck. Now, that's just speculation on my part, but that's what it seemed like the direction they were going was in.
Makes sense.
So, like, I was, like, thinking in my head, like, what if someday you could get a license for the Fox engine, for either movies or for your own studio? Like, is that where they were going with this, or was this always strictly going to be an in-house tool?
Please stop. Please stop making me think of a brighter future. I can't handle that
truly.
today in this day and age.
Dare to dream.
Yeah, no. If that it would make sense to license the Fox engine. If Konami's trying to make money, that would have been okay. So they might not. That might not have been the best idea, because they might that meant they would have had to provide like tools and documentation and support for people that licensed the engine. The only people that were really trained to use it was, like two studios,
but
Kojima Productions and the guys who make the soccer game.
Right, but here's the thing. When they were building the Fox engine, the impetus behind making that engine was to make a tool that would allow their artists who were non-programmers to hop in and make quick changes and prototype things without having to rely on the development staff. So it was intended to be easy to use to some extent.
Exactly. But you can do the same exact thing with the Unreal Engine.
True.
And Unreal Engine, they have way more support for people that license their engine. And also you can start messing around with the Unreal Engine for free. So unless Konami was willing to say like, hey, here's our engine, here's all this technology that we've built, here's all our industry secrets for free, and then if you make a product and you want to sell it, then you give us licensing rights. I don't think they were willing to do that.
Well, this was also kind of a different time, like the landscape has changed dramatically. And like I said, I don't really have any evidence for this. This is just speculation on my part.
Yeah.
He kept talking about wanting to get his hands into Hollywood and how the Fox engine could crank out Hollywood level visual effects and et cetera, et cetera. And so it just kind of, I was, Pepe Silva putting, things together on the wall here.
So sorry for the noob question. But what is the precedence as far as the East with licensing engines? Like, I know obviously about Unreal, but I wasn't sure how that business works.
Man. Oh, you have opened up an entire can of worms.
Okay, I'm glad.
It depends on the kind of company you are. If you are an independent studio, for example, Unreal actually just changed their licensing agreement with the announcement of Unreal 5.
Didn't they say something like if your game, like the license is free to use until your game makes up to like a certain
like $1 million
revenue?
Until your game makes $1 million, you don't owe any royalties. They just pulled the rug out from under Unity in that regard, because before Unity had the much better deal.
Yeah,
Something like $100,000 in sales.
Okay, do you guys remember the period of gaming history when all these Japanese companies were outsourcing their games to Western studios? You had Konami; they had Castlevania being developed by Mercury Steam. Sega had all these shitty games that were coming out, like Binary Domain and everything, to try to appeal to Western audiences. You guys remember that?
Yeah, that was like a culty thing, like a cult classic, if I recall. Not very
Binary
good, though.
Domain? Maybe.
Yeah,
maybe.
like culty isn't.
They did it with
so
the Silent
bad
Hill
good.
games.
Well,
like Homecomings, I think.
Oh, right. Homecoming,
Shattered Memories,
I definitely remember
Downpour. I think Silent Hill Origins was one too.
Yep. Yeah. And I talked to one of the guys who worked on that game, because they were working on a reboot for the Legacy of Kain series, and some footage of that game leaked, and so I did a video on that, and it's just a matter of money. But anyway, so all these Japanese companies were outsourcing their intellectual properties to Western studios because they were hoping that they could appeal to Western audiences, because they needed to make more money, because games were costing more money to make. It's a vicious cycle. And the reason why, for the longest time, like Japan, people were saying like the Japanese gaming industry is dying, it's dead. I don't know if you guys remember that, but like Japanese studios weren't putting out quality games, and a lot of studios had to close. And so, you had Platinum that was keeping that Japanese style of game development alive. But
Platinum was born out of Clover closing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And they were like the one studio that was able to make quality Japanese style games. Everything else was like so many studios had to close because they just couldn't keep up with console development on the PS3 and Xbox. They didn't have the resources. And the reason for that was because the way that games were made in Japan before, I want to say 2014, was when you started a new project, you started from the ground up, from scratch. You made the engine and everything from scratch, custom for every single project, which is, every Japanese game on PS2, it uses its own engine that was built specifically for that game and for nothing else. Devil May Cry, Capcom, all of their games, Onimusha. And it's weird because Onimusha is like a Resident Evil clone, right? But it has its own engine. It's not like it uses the same engine as like Code Veronica or something like that. So obviously that's like ridiculously expensive to make a custom engine for every single game. But their entire development pipeline was based around like, okay, here's step one is making the engine. And because Japan has this thing about, tradition, and it's difficult for Japanese developers to innovate because their development pipeline is very rooted in like, okay, here's just the way it's done. Here's the way we've been doing it. And so they kept that going for the longest time until Bit Summit came along. So you guys remember Electronic Gaming Monthly? Mm-hmm. May they rest in peace. Miss those guys so much.
Dan, if you're out there, we love you. Sorry.
Yeah. So the lead editor, the editor-in-chief of that, he split off to make his own studio. What are they called? They do the Pixel Junk series. I forget the name of the studio, but he formed his own indie studio headquartered in Japan, and then he decided, all right, let's do like an indie showcase for Japan, because like there were so many people that thought like the indie thing is impossible. The only way to get a job in the gaming industry in Japan is to join a big company. So this guy, his name is James Milky. His last name is really Milky. He's a cool dude though. So he puts together this thing called Bit Summit, and and it's just a showcase of all these indie developers in Japan. These indie. It's an indie festival held once a year, and one of their sponsors is they have Unity makes a presence there, Unreal Engine, and so you had this like it was like an awakening, this indie awakening in Japan, and like the first Bit Summit I want to say was 2011, 2012. I went to the second one. I was lucky enough to see it live, but ever since then, you had the Unreal Engine, and Unity was a thing, and then soon after that, you saw this huge comeback in Japanese games, which was mind blowing to see. You had all these high quality Japanese titles coming out. Neo, you had like Platinum was still doing their thing. And now you have all these studios that are making games with the Unreal Engine. Like Square Enix, they work on the Unreal Engine exclusively now. Have you guys noticed that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what FF7 Remake was built on.
Exactly. And they had their own engine. They had their Crystal framework. What was it? It was called Luminous Studio that they were teasing. And then they were like, screw that. Kingdom Hearts was in development hell for decades. You know why? Because they were using a custom engine. And then they were like, screw it, we're going to use Unreal Engine. And the game finally got released. So
better or worse.
Right. Yeah. But the fact that this engine came along and is helping Japanese studios actually finish games, it's a good thing. Because Final Fantasy 15. That game was built on Square's custom engine, because they were just like, here's how we make games. We make the engine for each specific game. And that's also why, and Nitroid, you'll be into this because, as a historian and an archivist, that's why Final Fantasy VIII, when they remastered that, they had to do it without the source code because
they didn't have it.
They didn't have it because they're terrible at archiving their stuff, because they make everything custom for every game.
The remaster was built. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, wasn't that what happened to the Silent Hill HD remake? Like, they pretty much gave them nothing to work with.
That sounds familiar. I remember hearing something like that.
I don't know too much about the Silent Hill HD kerfluffle, we'll say, but with Final Fantasy VIII. The version that got remastered is essentially the PC version. And the dead giveaway for that is the fact that it doesn't have any analog control, which the PC version is notorious for. So you've only got like 8 directional movement. Whereas the PS1 version, if you had an analog controller, had true analog movement. But there are also parts in the game that glitch occasionally, and I think they've patched this out, but at certain points the music would switch to MIDI. Rather than the actual tracks. And I actually had that happen to me while I was playing my first time through.
Wow.
And I've got other gripes with that remaster beyond just the fact that it was, built off of the PC version, but that's a talk for another time. On the Japanese developers creating a new engine each time, Kojima and the KCEJ team, they didn't quite do that. They were sort of doing something something kind of in between. For each new Metal Gear Solid game, they would build on top of the old engine. So
right, yeah. I remember seeing that prototype for MGS3 was made in just like the bare bones MGS2 engine.
Yeah, and they did have to rewrite major parts of it, but it's still, you can look at parts of MGS4's code, and there are still references to MGS1. And its code. So there's still legacy MGS1 code in MGS4. And then the Fox engine was built on top of MGS4.
Yeah. I can totally see the DNA in there. So yeah, they smartened up and they were like, hey, like doing this engine rewriting thing, it's not going to work. So they decided to create the Fox engine, which is still being used for Winning 11. So good for them.
Is that confirmed? Because I've never been able to actually get confirmation on that.
What do you mean?
that the Fox engine is still being used for Winning 11.
I'm pretty sure it is.
Because if I remember right, they stripped the branding out at least 2 years ago.
They might have done that, but I can't think of any other reason. They might have switched to Unreal, honestly. That would be crazy. But that's like the
sense.
one...
I mean,
right.
Konami is using they're using Unity in-house. That's what they had for Super Bomberman R. That was built in Unity.
Man, let me see. What's the most recent version is 2019.
I've been looking for references to the Fox engine now for a couple years, and there's almost nothing other than like Metal Gear Survive.
Well, the Wikipedia for Pro Evolution Soccer 2019 says Fox engine, and then the
I looked into that and I checked. There's no. The last time I checked, there was no citation for that other than a news article that made an assumption.
Well, I think the easiest way to check would be to look at the credits for the game.
Right. Yeah, that would. But that's what I mean. It's I haven't checked them, but I've had someone that I've talked to tell me that they've like stripped the branding out, so you don't see the Fox engine logo anymore. So I don't know if they would even mention it at that point. But yeah, you'd have to check. I should probably actually go and check, rather than just kind of assume it's gone.
So the next Metal Gear game should be is finding out about what happened to the Fox engine.
Metal Gear Solid 7, the search for Metal Gear Solid 6.
That could work. That would totally work. You know what?
Go full Mel Brooks with it.
Do a sequel to Police Nuts. Have it be a detective game,
I would love that. I don't know. I mean, at this point, I'm kind of against any kind of direct sequel to Kojima games. I would rather see them become sort of anthology titles, similar to like classic 007 movies or Final Fantasy, where each one is sort of a unique interpretation of a collection of themes and tropes and images and ideas, rather than like an ongoing chronological story that carries all this baggage from game to game to game.
It sounds like what Jordan Roberts is doing with the movie, pretty much.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
I don't think we are going to see how that goes. I mean, and
you don't think
by
so?
that I mean, yeah, but I feel like if I could get rid of this stutter, I think the actual we'll see how that goes will be we won't see anything of it. I don't think that project's going to get off the ground.
If
you think this artwork's just a treat, like just for fans kind of then?
Well, and I hope I'm wrong, because the first step to making something good is you got to fuck up real bad. So there's no doubt in my mind that this Metal Gear Solid movie is going to be absolutely terrible if it actually does get made. Because I didn't hate Kong Skull Island. I didn't think it was a bad movie, but it's not great either. And in order to put a project like this together, you have to convince a publisher, so a big studio, that it's going to make gangbusters of money. So, like, and in order to make that much money, you really got to have an amazing concept that, like, you got to have a great script, amazing concept art, and if you,
I don't think Metal Gear carries that kind of attention anymore.
It doesn't. Yeah.
I don't think it ever did, honestly.
Right. So trying to convince a studio to fund this operation, because there's no way, I can't imagine trying to make this movie without it being like $150 million or more. There's no way you do this like a Blumhouse indie type deal.
But man, if they did, I would love it.
Oh yeah, sure. Right? Because then you could be super experimental and you don't have to worry about making money. You can do something that has artistic merit. But that's not going to happen.
Just to clarify something I said, like, I realize when I say that I don't think Metal Gear's ever commanded that kind of attention, let me be specific. Because, yes, this series has sold a ridiculous number of copies, but it's never kind of held the cultural consciousness in the way that some other game franchises have.
Right.
So it's still, despite selling that many copies, it's still kind of niche in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying.
That's just kind of what I meant. I mean, if this movie does manifest with everything I've heard about it, I think it's going to end up kind of like, and I know I've said this before, but like the live action Ghost in the Shell movie, where it was sort of this chimera of everything Ghost in the Shell that had been released up to that point.
Yeah, good point.
Whether it was Arise or Standalone Complex or Innocence or the original film or the manga, it was like, okay, we're going to grab this here, this here, this here, this here, this here, with no consideration about why these elements were placed where they were placed, and we're just going to put them in because that's what people remember. And I think that's kind of where we're ending up with this. So if it does happen, it's going to be kind of like that movie. That's my gut feeling. It'll be a more pretentious version of the Ghost in the Shell live action movie.
Yeah, I think I would honestly be okay with that if it turned out to be at or around the same level of quality as that Ghost in the Shell movie. I think that's the best case scenario, honestly.
Probably.
Did you see you saw that one scene that he posted that was kind of like it was like a storyboard kind of thing, but
Which
with
one?
all the blood, with the blood droplets, and then it turned into water, and it was like him underwater, and the chick's face showed up.
Speaking of images that have come out, did you see the director of the Netflix Castlevania series posted a sketch of Solid Snake and was like, "Don't read into this."
Yeah.
And I'm gonna read the hell into that, man, because everybody wants that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I would love, actually, to see like little anime shorts told in that world that aren't like the retelling of the Metal Gear story, but are just like explorations of the world. Like, I would love that.
Yeah.
What would you want to see explored?
Just like, you've got all these weird aspects of society now that, like, okay, I'll give you an example. Show me like how some other military groups operate with SOP where they can like feel each other's thoughts and feelings. Like, show me how they would interact.
Oh, you mean like an Animatrix type anthology?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Ooh.
Where you just show me little bits of the world rather than just retelling Metal Gear Solid 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever. Just like show me pieces of the world, just short little glimpses. Or like, show me how people reacted to Arsenal gear plowing into Lower Manhattan.
Dude, take my money.
Right?
Take it.
Like, but they're not going to do that because people are so like, I want to see the cyborg ninja and I want to see it fight Rex because that's cool. These robots are cool. Like, it reminds me of, I was talking about this on Twitter, but like back on the old Metal Gear Solid, the unofficial site forums, there was a dude who made a thread where he bragged about how Metal Gear Solid was such an inspiration to him that it convinced him to enlist in the army.
So, and did everybody start calling him Meryl?
Everybody, like, oh my God, like, pages and pages and pages of debate with this one guy trying to convince him that this was an anti-war series, and he just wasn't having it.
Right.
And, like, how that is, like, that's how I feel like most Metal Gear fans are. It's like that you ever seen that one meme of like the Gundam shooting the war is bad message over the guy's head who's looking at the Gundam and going, wow, cool robot. Like, that's like every Metal Gear Solid fan.
It's also, I've seen the one with the cyberpunk where it shows like, corporate dystopia and it's like, augments.
Exactly,
cool
yeah.
Robot
And
hands.
so that's, I think, going to flavor much of the Metal Gear Solid movie, because even if Jordan Vogt-Roberts is intimately aware of the intricacies and nuances of the series, in order to sell this as a blockbuster film, which he has to do as a responsible director, as a project manager, he has to cater to those people first. And that's why I'm skeptical. I want a good Metal Gear movie. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt here. It's been, 20 years now? 22 years since the Metal Gear Solid movie was first, mentioned as a possibility, and only now are we getting concept art. So I'm so skeptical of whether or not this is ever going to manifest, and if it will, I'm kind of right there with you. I don't want to be a cynic, but I am.
Now that you mention that though, I'm wondering if he really does get the source material, and right now we don't have any indication that he really does get it. What we do have so far, we just know that he's a massive fanboy. So, but if hypothetically, if he really did get it, what if he could do just what Kojima did and give those fans what they want, while at the same time, delivering the true message, which is, that it's an anti-war story, but you trick the mainstream audience into thinking like, oh, it's pro-war. That would be cool.
Can I tell you why I don't think that's going to happen?
Please do.
I feel like we have the same reason, but I'm going to let you say it.
Okay, the reason I don't think that's going to happen is because of the writer, specifically. The guy writing it is, if I remember right, it's Derek Connolly who wrote Jurassic World. And Jurassic World tried to do something almost exactly like that, with a message about consumerism and like, oh, we're going to turn we're going to take this thing that you remember and we're going to turn it into a product, and we're going to slap all of our labels and our brands on it, and we're going to dilute it. And so Jurassic World tried to be a movie about that problem, but it was also exactly that at the same time, but it wasn't smart enough to balance the two. It tried to have its cake and eat it too, and it just ended up smashing its face into it instead.
Right.
And so I feel like if he's writing it, we're going to get the same thing. And I hate to like call out somebody specifically, but I have not liked anything he's written.
Yeah. For me, it's like, when was the last time you saw a movie with early concept art? Or when was the last time you saw early concept art for a movie that actually got made? I don't think that usually doesn't happen.
I'll tell you, the last time I saw a movie with concept art that didn't get made that broke my heart was Neil Blomkamp's Alien sequel. Okay. I don't know if you've seen that or not.
I mean, I despise Neil Blomkamp.
You should go and look this up anyway, because it might. I'm wondering if this is maybe the same case with Jordan, where maybe this is just the movie that they were born to make, and it'll come out well. I don't know. Maybe. I try to be an optimist. But the idea that Blomkamp had with Alien was he wanted to erase Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, and he wanted to do a direct sequel to Aliens that was bringing back Sigourney Weaver and bringing back Michael Biehn, and it was directly following that. And there's all this really cool imagery of like where they bring the engineers' ship back to like a dry dock and they're exploring it, and it's just really cool concept art. It seemed like a cool concept. It didn't get anywhere though, because Ridley Scott decided to take the reins back and do Covenant, but
that poor guy.
Oh well. Like he was hyping it up like crazy, and then it just kind of got yanked out from under him.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I mean. Like you don't see early concept art for a movie and then actually have it get made. It's rare that happens.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like they wouldn't leak it if it was something still. I don't know.
It does strike me very much like trying to build enthusiasm rather than riding a wave.
Okay, Days, you're gonna have to explain this one.
This is my favorite Kojima tweet, everybody. It's a picture of him about to dig into this Eggs Benedict, saying, "Eggs Benedict look like boobies when shaking plate. LOL."
So what does that make the asparagus?
Oh no, I don't know actually, but I really like Eggs.
And why
Benedict.
are there two of them? His Twitter account is a gift.
It's like when you're having a really shitty day and your friends are like, "Hey, how's it going?" But you don't want to like get into it. You're just like, "I'm all right."
I'm all right. Oh yeah, beat Final Fantasy VII. Didn't like it.
I'm sorry, man.
Remake. Yeah.
I mean, we told you weren't gonna like it.
What'd you think of that ending?
I know. I'm just like that. That's exactly where it got like just like I'm just. I think Rocco said it best. It felt like a child explaining a dream. It was just like, damn it, I didn't need this part. Because just like when it went in this, they were like, hey, we're about to go in this portal in this space of nothingness. I was just like, God damn it.
I like how the giant arbiter of fate is basically the creature you fight from Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Like, what do you mean you?
Let's go fight this boss that we've never seen before. Represents anything we've seen throughout the game. Cool.
Mystery box.
That's Final Fantasy.
Is God, I can't pronounce his name. Nomura.
Tetsuya Nomura. Yeah.
Yeah. Is he video games Alex Kurtzman?
I don't know who that is.
He's the guy who wrote Picard.
No, I would put Nomura leagues above Alex Kurtzman.
That's fair. And somebody's gonna like try to kill me for saying
and
that.
Nomura, I mean, he was not the only writer on this. I mean, you can definitely feel his influence, but this was done by the original writers, shy of Sakaguchi. So, I don't know.
Yeah,
Kurtzman's a whole nother ball game.
So you fight a giant heartless at the end of the game, and the giant heartless represents the fandom, all of it, all of the fandom, who is just like, oh, you can't change anything, and you got to keep everything the same because that's Final Fantasy VII. And so the whole point of the game is Aerith and the gang saying, hey, we need to change Final Fantasy VII. Come with me.
Aerith seems to be kind of aware of what's going on.
Right.
From minute one, she knows what's up. And a lot of people are like saying like maybe she's on New Game Plus, so to speak.
Yeah, no, she
I've seen how this goes. I don't like how it ends. I want my
Sephiroth
boyfriend
too.
back.
Sephiroth too, I feel like he's in on it.
Yeah. They're both kind of playing cards and everyone else is just sort of... Those are the two playing chess and everyone else are the pieces.
That's why she's so laid back and humored, because she knows, she's like well aware.
She's going to make it through.
Well, she says that one line right before you beat Sephiroth where she's like, we can make it right. Like, make what right? What are you talking about? And then, 5 minutes later, Zack's alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's pulling some strings, man.
Just that the game just kind of like felt like a slog. Like I think I DM'd you at one point. I was like, man, going through chapter 17, it's just Jesus. Was it 17 or 16? I don't even remember.
Battle system though, man.
The battle system was good.
Could have been better. I mean, everything has its flaws.
Yeah, Materia was kind of the issue because they tried to like keep it scaled down since this is obviously only a portion of a full game.
Yeah, and there were some weapons where I was just like, no, I'm not using that.
Right.
Like, fuck out of here. Oh, and 2 materia slots? Like, why? Oh, I have a high critical rate with a baseball bat? Okay.
Yeah, the balancing.
There's probably
weird.
some secret to that weapon, but I don't know.
Like, you're simultaneously giving us far too much and far too little to use in this system because you know that there's...
Yeah, I didn't use half of that shit.
I would still recommend the game. I would recommend the game if ghosts weren't in the game, the way that they were implemented.
How would you do it? Would you just strip
just
them out and
delete
do a straight... You would just do a straight remake.
I would... No, okay, that's a good question. Yeah, how would I fix it? Man, I wouldn't try and add a bunch of filler, but I think they changed too much, but not enough at the same time. We talked about this, Fingers, while you were still working. You were like halfway through the game, and I mean, there's potential there because it seems like Avalanche, they're a bunch of kids. You could have had some commentary about using child soldiers, and Barrett's this warlord maybe, because they're wearing freaking costume pieces from Golden Saucer, and they're going up against this military. Like, they got no business being eco-terrorists, and, Jessie's cooking up bombs, but she's dressed like a friggin', my first Romeo and Juliet play,
Is that really
third
the
grade
focus
recital.
Of the story, though? Is
that's
that going out of scope?
Yes.
That's like the filler that they did. Like, they didn't need all these like new characters that they made up. Like they should have just built off of what was there and like made the side quests more based on the party or some of the more immediate people.
It's funny because I feel like Final Fantasy VII remaking this game is a fool's errand. It's
exactly. Well, that was the point of the story. It's like, no matter what we do, you guys are going to be mad. So here's what we're gonna do is piss you off with a Heartless battle, because that's what you want. You want more Kingdom Hearts, right? So here, just take the Kingdom Hearts.
It feels like they decided, this is not going to work perfectly no matter which direction we go. So let's at least seem kind of clever about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably true. I mean, that's like, I appreciate the attempt at it. I'm saying like the whole game, like for the most part, going through it, running through all the maps and stuff just kind of felt like a slog to me. And like, I beat it in just under 40 hours. I was at like 39:57, but that felt like 60 or 80. Like,
you took your sweet precious time.
Long.
Right? Yeah.
I did all the side quests and everything. Like, that's, I did everything.
I enjoyed it, but I mean, I was never gonna be super invested in the FF7 remake because I'm sitting here waiting for the FF8 remake. So I don't know about the rest of y'all.
Yeah,
that's never gonna happen. I'll be here until I'm like 80.
Could happen though.
Yeah, well, it won't.
I mean,
not enough people like 8.
I don't know. I feel like the nostalgia factor for that, because it came out September 9th, 99, the same day as the Dreamcast. There's history there.
Yeah, but not like 7. I mean,
no, truly, yeah.
7 is on a whole nother level, and well, it's hard to explain why. That game resonated so strongly, and just I don't know.
Yeah, 8 was my first Final Fantasy, the first one I played, but 7 was the first one I really got into. So actually no, that's not true. I rented 10 from Blockbuster back in the day, and then I went back to play 7 years later.
Oh, I bet that was jarring.
Surprisingly, no. I took to FF7. 7 was the first Final Fantasy I actually beat. And I didn't beat 10 until 10 years after I beat 7. It's weird, right? My timeline with Final Fantasy is worse than Metal Gear. It's nuts. But okay. Well, FF8, I feel like they could remake it if they really wanted to, but first they got to finish the next. We don't know how many parts this FF7 remake is going to be. At least 3. I doubt they'll be able to finish everything they need to do in another just one more part. So,
are they going to go meta if they do an FF8 remake?
Like they did with FF7?
Yeah. I mean, they've set a precedent now,
Hopefully they learn their lesson from this game and they don't do that.
I feel like if they did a straight remake for 8, they'd I don't know, it's like sawing the branch off that you're sitting on.
Yeah. Actually, I think you're right. I don't think they will remake any other Final Fantasy game besides 7, because 8 doesn't have Advent Children and all the other games as part of the FF7 saga. So
yeah, I mean they've said we'd love to remake other ones. But, you're not gonna. You've said that before.
Get another remaster.
There was it's I'm interested to watch the rest of this because I just started watching. Tim Rogers just dropped his review for the 7 remake, and I think it's 3.5 hours long. So I'm interested to see where he kind of goes with that.
He's going to talk about Aerith
pretty
a whole
much
bunch.
Just felt like the best parts of it were when they were sticking to the script and nailing what was cool about Final Fantasy VII. The cutscenes when the motorcycle in the second half, when he came in and he wiped out all the troops and shit. That was dope. See,
but
the destruction of the plate. I thought that I know you don't like the twin snake-ifying of it, but I thought seeing that in a modern action scene, I was cool. They could just make a movie of all this type shit, and that's kind of what I was like. If y'all want to do this, because it just felt like Advent Children to me. That's the whole thing just felt like Advent.
What's funny is if you go and watch Advent Children now, it looks 100 times worse than the remake.
Oh, I bet. That's
we've now gotten to a place where the graphics in game look better than Advent Children the movie.
I had a ton of problems with the graphics in 7. Look at any door. The textures are from the PS1 era.
I didn't have texture issues, but maybe I just wasn't paying attention.
It's not texture loading at all. If you look at the doors in Aerith's house, they're just the doors are just shitty. Same with your apartment that is has no reason to be in the game.
Yeah, that door was always screwed up.
Why do I even need an apartment? Can't I just what the hell? I don't need this old lady with her weird samurai hairstyle and who the hell is this dude? The game's weird, all right? So, but yeah, I think they changed a lot, but they didn't change enough because like you mentioned, and I saw it Nitroid. You were saying the original FF7 was it was a goofy game with serious moments, and this is the opposite of that. If they were really trying to make a more serious game and bring it into the 21st century, then there are a lot of changes that need to be made that to make sense of this universe. And one of those, in my opinion, the main thing that kept me from being fully immersed in this world is the fact that Avalanche is a bunch of bumbling kids parading as eco-terrorists. But I still don't think they would be. And the fact that they introduce there's a separate faction of Avalanche who's way more militaristic. That was so weird to me.
Yeah, that was kind of strange. Like, oh, I didn't know this was a thing. I thought it was literally just like 4 people.
Yeah. I mean, it was, and now it's not. So...
Yeah, that guy is like, I'm your inside person.
Like, what the fuck? And is that going to factor into the next couple parts of the remake? Like, what do you mean?
Okay, I got one question for you guys, because we're coming up on 2 hours here. We're probably going to have to cut it.
Yeah.
But here's my question for you regarding part 2 of this game. Given how much swearing they've written into this script, is Sid going to drop an F-bomb?
You goddamn right.
He can drop one, and it could still be rated T for teen. Well, at least that's how it works in movies.
But do you think he will?
Nah.
You think they'll just...
Here's what I think will happen. Ket Sith will come in, and he'll censor him.
He'll just honk his horn?
Yeah. That's what I think will happen.
Or megaphone. It's a megaphone, isn't it?
Yeah, megaphone, or Red 13 will growl, or he'll do an ocelot.
So you think there will be comical censoring of every time he tries to get a curse out?
I think so. I think because that would actually be in line with the tone of the original game. Because, the way that they wrote it with
not going for that.
with the symbols.
Cloud was cussing a whole bunch in it.
Yeah, but he didn't drop an F-bomb.
No, but he called somebody bitch at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he didn't drop an F-bomb, and that's...
Yeah, it was about 4 or 5 bitches.
The most effective moment of swearing in the game was when Aerith, the ladder, dropped out from under her.
Oh, right. Yeah,
She's like, shit. That was so good.
Yeah, I like that. Oh, real quick, do you want to talk about the cross-dressing scene?
Oh my god, they really went hard on that, didn't they?
I swear I thought they were going to take it out. I was like, there's no way they're going to do it.
Oh, they did it.
Yep, nailed it. Thank you.
I probably laughed for like 10 minutes at that line.
Yeah, I thought it was a good line.
There are just moments like that in the game that are just pitch perfect.
And then you got to sneak into Jessie's house and take a key card out of her dad's suit. Like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah, and they're all dead now anyway, I guess.
I mean, all right, spoilers, right?
Ooh.
If you haven't played the game, why would you even play the remake if you haven't played the original? And that's the whole deal, is that they made the game for people that played the original, but they made it as if we hadn't all seen this before. Like, we didn't think Jessie was going to die. Like, oh, you're trying to pull at my heartstrings and make me care about this person that I don't care about? Well, not going to happen.
Well, a lot of people were going to play this as their first time through.
Yeah, that's a huge mistake.
Those poor people.
Yep.
Yeah.
But, the character models look okay. Except for Cloud's weird arms. I don't know why they bend that way, but other than that, I think the graphics are phenomenal, and I liked playing the game and just seeing my memories rendered in immaculate high resolution.
That was pretty much like, the enjoyment I got. I was like, all right, cool, this looks nice.
Yeah.
But hopefully they fix it and do some adjustments in part 2 and take out some of this bullshit filler stuff.
Either get rid of the doors or fix them, because your doors are jacked.
The doors can stay, but the leaning up against a wall and squeaking through tight corridors has got to go.
Yeah.
Good luck.
So many slow movements like that going through. Yeah. Maybe on PS5 we won't have to worry about loading and shit, and we'll just...
No loading times and no corridors.
God. You reminded me of that Unreal Engine 5 demo, where they actually... It's a pre-canned demo, but they have you...
And they still had it.
What are you doing?
They're like, we're just showing off what
we gotta
that
load.
looks like on...
Well, they're doing it because it's a stylistic choice now, not because it's a pragmatic one.
BS. Yeah. Whatever.